Welcome to Lesson 4, Making Selective Changes in Photoshop Creative Cloud. Lesson 4 includes a lot of information, and you're going to want to follow the book from the beginning of the lesson to the end. I'm just pulling out some examples here to help clarify some of the more difficult selection techniques. We're going to start by going to Bridge and then opening up the image that's called PS0404. And I'm opening that up in Photoshop, and you can see that this image has a lot of hair in here, and the hair makes for a pretty difficult selection. I'm selecting the quick selection tool, which allows me to click and drag and essentially paint a selection. Now I'm painting the selection, but I'm also not catching every one of those hairs. To help me with this, I can go up and click on Refine Edge. Now the Refine Edge feature appears if you have a selection tool active. So I do have the quick selection tool still active, so I can click on Refine Edge. Now in here, I can turn on a smart radius if I have something that has texture throughout and I want to soften the edges. In this particular case, I only want to fix the selection around the hair. Now notice that I can change the view mode either by pressing F, where I can cycle through different views. And I prefer when I'm working on something like hair to select this one that's called On Black. That way I can see how bad my selection really is until I fix it. I don't want to turn on that smart radius because, again, I only want to fix the hair. So I'm using the Refine Radius tool instead. And when I click and I drag, you can see I'm only refining the area that I'm painting. Now, if you accidentally go in too far and you start refining an area that doesn't need refinement, you can also select Erase Refinements. So I'm going back to the Refine Radius and I'm just going to fix some of this selection along the edge. And you can see that even now on that really difficult black background, I'm catching the ends of those hair much better. And in fact, I can even change my view to black and white and you can see what a great selection is being made here. Now once I've had this selection, I can choose down at the bottom to output this to just a selection, and maybe that's because I want to make a change to it. I can also select that I want to output it to something called a layer mask, and we're going to be using masks throughout this whole book. And so if I click on Layer Mask and click OK, you'll see that it instantly masked out the rest of the area and it provided me with a mask off to the right. Notice that if I hold down my Option or Alt key and click on that mask, that I can see it. I could even paint on this, and we're going to go into that in the next part of this lesson, painting on masks. Keep in mind that the Refine Edge is an incredible feature that is available to you when you're making selections, but it's also available when you create something as a mask. So let me take this a little bit further with the next image. I'm going to select File, Browse, and Bridge, and I'm going to open up this duck image. I'm going to make a selection a little differently. Now, of course, I could use the quick selection tool and probably get a really great selection for this, but intentionally, I'm going to use the lasso tool, which is a tool that requires you to click and drag to make a selection. And it's not going to be perfect, but I don't want it to be perfect for what I'm doing. Now I can just simply press Q and you'll see that it takes me into something called the quick mask mode. And if I press Q again, I exit it. If I switch to a 2-column toolbar, you'll see that down at the bottom I can also click on the Edit and Quick Mask Mode button or click again to exit it. When I'm in this mode, I can take my paintbrush, and if I'm set to the default colors of black and white, which you can always be if you just simply press D, you'll see that when I paint with black, that I'm actually painting mask material. And when I press Q, you can see that is no longer selected. Press Q again, and maybe this time I'll swap the colors by either pressing X or clicking on the switch foreground and background colors. And you'll notice that if I erase this, and I'm going to make my brush just a little bigger right now by hitting that right bracket. But if I erase this, you'll see when I exit quick mask mode that no longer is selected. This little technique and using quick mask is great for helping you to understand what masks are. this orange area is blocking anything from being selected. The white or clear area is actually the selection area. And if you've ever worked with film or worked in the print industry, this probably makes a lot of sense to you, because you'll notice that when you have a mask, it looks a little bit like the masking material, amberlith or rubylith, that was used in conventional printing. Now I'm going to leave this bad selection as it is, and I'm going to exit Quick Mask, and you can see I have this active selection, but I'm going to take my layers panel and drag it out so you can see it a little better, and click on the Add a Mask button. And you'll notice that when I add this as a mask, I can go up to something called the Properties panel, and I also can access the Refine Edge from here. So you'll see I can feather or soften the selection, or I can even go into something called Mask Edge, and you'll recognize this as being the same Refine Edge feature that I was able to access up in the options bar. But the interesting thing is that this is editing an existing mask. And so you'll see when I click on OK and I exit this and go back to my layers panel that I am actually refining this mask that is positioned off to the right. So you end up with the same thing, but you can edit it a little bit more if you have this mask selected and you go up and you choose Window Properties. Now let's say that I'm happy with that particular image. I can of course take a selected image, and I'm going to go to Browse and Bridge. I'm going to open up another image. I can now take that image with the mask by taking the Move tool, and I can grab hold of this duck, and you'll see that's because there's a chain connecting that mask. I can grab hold of this duck, bring it up to the tab for that other image, and drag it down and release it, and then have it in this image, but yet still be able to edit that mask. Now let's do one more selection technique. I'm going to go back up into Browse and Bridge. In the book, you'll find several exercises to help you to use the pen tool. In here, I'm just selecting a file, and I'm going to demonstrate using it to make a selection. You'll want to practice with those files though. So I'm selecting the pen tool, and you'll notice that I'm also going to zoom in. I'm taking the zoom tool and I'm unchecking scrubby zoom, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to be able to click and drag a zoom area. I'm now taking my pen tool and I'm clicking and dragging. Now notice what I'm doing. I am clicking and dragging, and I'm controlling that directional line so that it flows alongside that apple. I'm not doing this. I'm doing this nice little click and drag. I'm also not doing that. So I'm going to Command Z, Command Option Z. If you're on a PC, you would of course do Control Z or Control Alt Z. So I'm clicking and dragging and following this. I added a little kink in that, and that's okay. I'm going to leave that for now, and that's just because I was playing around with that pen tool. I'll come back and fix that. But I'm going around these areas. Now I need to change direction here because I need to go back out. So now I hold down my Option key or Alt key and drag that out, and click and drag, and click and drag, and go all the way around until I get back to the beginning. Now I can edit this by going into the direct selection tool, and I can adjust this. I'm going to undo that because I accidentally moved a little more than I wanted to. There we go. I want to just select individual points, and so I had to click off and back on. And you'll notice that now I can go in and fix that little bit of a kink there. I can adjust these points, but I can get it to be a much better selection. Still not perfect, but the great thing is I don't have to worry about this. I can fix this whenever I want. That's because I can come over to my layers panel, and instead of just clicking, which creates a pixel mask, I can hold down my Command or Control key and click on Add a Vector Mask. And now I have a selection that's been made from my pen path. But yet, I can still go back in and edit this whenever I want, and you'll see that it creates it as the mask. Now, anytime you want to disable these, you can hold your Shift key down and click on those so that you can see what the entire image looks like. But then again, it's a great, easy way of creating a mask, and it's much more precise in many cases than using pixel selection techniques. So in this lesson, you learned about making selective changes and starting to make masks. This has been Jennifer Smith for Digital Classroom.